Good morning. Thank you very much for this invitation to come and to speak in this meeting, which, as Ian has told, is very exciting. And what is especially exciting is this idea that I have taken from what Ian said me when he invited me to come here, which is this idea of a vision and not only of a logic. We always speak of a logic, we speak of method, we speak of how to do. But the vision of what we are for, what we are interested in, and what we would like evaluation to be in the present crisis, in the current crisis, I think was an exciting title. So I took up this challenge, and I hope you will forgive me if I am entering into something which is a bit daring, at least to me, but I hope I can explain you why I chose this way of approaching the subject. So what I will say in this brief talk is the following. First of all, I will try and explain how we feel inside this general crisis, what is it and how it is relevant for evaluation, what usually evaluators do in this period, and whether they could do something different. Secondly, I will try to develop two scenarios in which I think evaluators at the moment are when they think about what to do about the crisis. And these two scenarios are the ordinary distributive policies where we are asked to intervene in order to say how to reduce spending and waste. And the second is how we feel about this evidence-based policy movement that is based on the idea that nothing works, crisis if ever there was one, and what are the policy implications. I will not enter into all the methodological debates about what these things imply. I will try to talk about the policy implications of the suggestions that are put forward inside these two different scenarios. And in the end, I will try to understand what learning we can have from this, because I think that we always talk about evaluation and learning, but I think we have to think about what learning means to us. We give for granted that you know something, you learn something, and then you act accordingly. And I don't think this is the case, as many people have said before me. So what I will try to say is, what can evaluators do if they want to learn in a different way from evaluation? So, the general crisis we live in, when I say general crisis, I mean that now everybody agrees that we are not simply having a financial crisis with low productivity, with the spending which is increased enormously. We are also entering into a political crisis. Centralistic institutions are challenged all over. Governments are less legitimate than before. There are many ways in which we think that this is a crisis not only from the economic point of view, but from a more general political point of view. And of course, social. There are statistics showing that the inequality has been growing all over this year. Some people say that it has reached the same level which was reached in 29. So, I mean, it's a very dangerous landscape. And what do we say? What is the general discourse that is done about this? It is that we need to, first of all, rigor, cutting expenditure. But we know that cutting expenditure could be simply if we cut everything from all the expenses that we do, there will be no idea of if we cut what works and what doesn't. So the need for rigor should not forget the need for equity. We should do something in a good way, in an equal way, in a just way. But people now understand that it is not simply a way of reducing spending in order to keep the equilibrium that existed before, but we need development. So I speak from what I see in my country and in Europe. I think all over it's a bit like this. So what I would like to stress here, that there is a need for development and not only for rigor. Equity and development are the words I think we should concentrate on. In evaluation, we are always witnessing this idea, listening to these prophets of doom. Nothing works. There are failures everywhere. And what we are familiar with is trying to fix something. What shown the distinction that is always made between single loop learning and double loop learning. The idea that we are invited to do something to reduce, to solve the problems that we are witnessing, to fix something which has gone wrong. But I think because of the general crisis we are in, we need to think as something different and something that we should reframe our way of understanding things in order to be able to face the new challenge. I think when I was thinking of this, I was reminded of the expression that Michael Patton is using for a kind of evaluation that he is doing, which is generally at the micro level, at a small organization, this idea of developmental evaluation. The idea that evaluation is not simply doing something for trying to do in the best way what was planned for, but it is something that is meant for development, for helping the situation to grow, maybe to do something different from what was expected. So evaluation that favors development. I think this idea of developmental evaluation could be taken up in a more wide way, and we could think in terms of, can our way of doing evaluation be a developmental evaluation according to the needs we have now in the current crisis? And okay, so development in this way may mean many different things, and we will see it. I will try to deal with these ideas in two situations. One, what we consider ordinary public policies. And the idea is that there are linear cuts. The governments say that we should cut 10%, 20% of public spending, and we try to resist it in some way. Some people say we should do more evaluation for better evaluation, or better use of the evaluation that exists. So there are ways in which we as people who are interested in evaluation say, well, this is a moment when we should do evaluation. And other people say that because of the need, there is no possible evaluation at the moment, so the policy requires something else. So I will try to see what can be done inside this idea. And second, when we deal with programs, because the evidence-based policy movement relates to programs, the idea is that it is possible to solve the problems by proposing a robust evaluation. It's a methodology. It's well-done evaluation will provide information, good information to decision makers, so they will take wise decisions. Well, I will try to see what are the policy implications of both situations. Ordinary policies are distributive policies generally. Most of our welfare states have developed in this way. In Italy, we call it assistenzialismo, which is a pejorative way of welfarism, which means that you simply give money, allocate money for consensus to different groups in a fragmentation of policies. So how you enlarged the spending to different groups to satisfy the peasant, the workers of a certain type, the autonomous workers, the state, the social service people, etc. Everybody got its bit in the pension policies, in the wage policies, in investment, any kind. Now it is the other way around. It is taken out from them little by little in the same way. So there was no planning, there was no structural, strategic policies at the beginning, and there is the same now. So we have to resist it. But in ordinary spending, there is a normal budgetary process. The budget is every year the same type of budget in which money is allocated by functions. then it becomes very difficult to decide what to cut. Because when you enter into how the budget is formed, you will realize that you cannot cut wages, you cannot cut structural infrastructures, so in the end you cut what is innovative, you cut everything which was produced in a new policy, and what remains is the backbone of something that means very little. I have the experience of the university spending, and I can tell you that although the university is meant to do research, innovation, etc., when it arrives at spending, at cutting on the spending, what is reduced is everything which is innovative, everything which is new research, and what remains is just the salaries of the people who are there and the little of the structure that exists there. So it's very difficult to enter there. And it is also a fact that these cuts are imposed from above. And it is very difficult to do something from the lower levels. The only kind of resistance that can be found is that coming from the division of power among the different ministries. So at the government level, the Ministry of Finance is much more able to resist the cuts than the Minister of Environment, for instance. Although in Italy, the Minister of Environment was a very active woman that resisted at some point to keep some money for her, but in a sense, it is a political fight that has nothing to do with assessing what should be kept because it works and what can be eliminated because it doesn't work. So in a sense, this situation brings for a very scarce role for evaluation. What are the alternatives to this? I think there are ways of resisting to this. The first thing is that there have been it is a moment when in national government there is all this development of league tables, of ratings, but these ratings are very much resisted. Not only they are resisted, but what I think we should enter into much more if we want to see what are the policy implications of all these activities, is that how should these league tables, how should these ratings be considered, how should they be used? It is easy to say we give a prize to the best performer and we sanction the worst performers. There are a lot of resistances of that, because who are the worst performers? Maybe there are people who are in a very bad condition and they may improve, they may change their position. So the leagues are a very stable and fixed way of looking at the reality. But if we think at development, we should be able to give a premium for the greatest, for the best improvement, for those who made a leap forward. So we need to think in terms of development and not simply in terms of a rating along a certain line. But this means that we have to develop trust and transparent criteria. And here comes all this idea of evaluation as judgment, because we need to have judgment, we need to have ways of judging in a consensual way, or in a way that many people could agree what is good and what is bad, because otherwise it is something which is imposed from above. And then in the political crisis I was talking before, it will be resented much more than just a linear cut. So unless we discuss on the criteria by which the ratings are organized and what it means, what is the meaning of certain location being put on a higher or on a lower level, and unless there is an agreement of that and there is a development of judgment between different groups in society, and I think that evaluation could very much contribute to this. Some people say that evaluation is just for giving judgments, not simply to say whether something was done or not, but whether something was good or bad. So developing criteria for judgment of what is good or what is bad is something that should be done in a much stronger way than it is done by involving the people who are to be put on a single rating. And this, of course, is a matter not only of trust. We should trust the people who do it, and it should be transparent. I mean, if you think, even at the big level, you know, everybody knows about all these ratings of the Enron and all these other cases. So even at the lower level of national and regional, local policies, I think the matter of transparent criteria for giving judgments about not only who is better and who is better performing and who is worse performing, but also who has more possibilities to improve, who should be sustained, supported, because there are good hopes that something can work in a good way. I think this is a very important one. I quoted here the example of Chelimsky at the Program Evaluation Methodology Division of the General Accounting Office in the 80s, because I found in something that she has written in an interview that she has given, which was collected by Valerie Caracelli and is published in the American Journal of Evaluation. And she talks about a situation which is quite similar to what we are having now. In the 80s, with the Reagan government, this idea of need to cut the public and welfare spending. And she talks about how the Program Evaluation Methodology Division worked in the public, having this idea of the public interest and in a very independent way. And this is a very interesting example, because it was usually thought that even at that time, there would not be any more room for evaluation. And actually, she showed that there was room. It was possible to save the programs that the group of evaluators thought were worth saving. And it was explained in a way that was taken into consideration not only the people who were the proposer of the laws that should be cut or kept, but working in the sense of having a larger public interest vision in front of her. But I think now we can think of how we could do this in a different way. And I think if we think in terms of a more democratic policy making, we can even look at these predicaments and difficulties by developing other ways of benchmarking, which is more horizontal. Think in a different way of tackling problems that can be compared. The idea of what works and we should cut what is good and what is bad is always an idea that there is something good and that should be kept, and the rest is bad. Whereas we see that there are many opportunities of different ways of approaching, tackling problems that can be compared, giving room to the situation, to the people in the different areas to show what they are doing better. So I think that there is a chance for democracy to take place, to a better democracy, more consensual democracy, of showing what is working in different places, and people can take this and work on that. And of course, stakeholder evaluation, involving stakeholders, asking them what they should be kept and what should be left out. It's a necessary contribution that should come from different social groups. So I think that when we think that we should get out of this crisis with more equity and greater development, we should think it in terms of how to involve people in judging what should be kept and what should be left out. And looking at what should be kept is having in front of us many different ways of tackling the same problem. So in this sense, also we should think in a different relationship between the central governments, the local governments, the group acting at the local level, because this means that there should be greater collaboration across levels. And it should not be something which is imposed from above. Because actually, everybody knows that there is a general crisis. So it is not possible to think that only the center, the hierarchy knows what to do and the people don't know. The people should be involved in assuming their own responsibility. And it is possible to do it. And if evaluation tries to involve the people in judgment of what is worth keeping and what can be left out, I think this would be an opportunity for a different way of learning, which is not simply, let me what works and I'll do it, but let's involve people to view of its policy consequences. The basic tenets I can just summarize here, starting from the fact that it was realized that nothing works, and the need to provide sound evidence of what works. Why? In how? By robust so-called method of impact evaluation. So the idea is that not only nothing works, but we are not even able to show what works if something does, because there is not enough, there are no good methods with no statistical power to show whether something works or doesn't. So the idea, look at impact by method that can show whether something works or doesn't. But the implications are that policymakers will take decisions based on evidence, not on ideology, because if there is no evidence, then decisions are taken according to the different ideas that someone holds, and it is necessary to hold them on evidence. This implies, first of all, that the evaluator is mainly a methodologist, but also a prince counselor, someone who says what is true, and with the expectation that the policymakers will follow. So there is an idea of the importance of saying something which is based on evidence from a good methodological point of view, and then this will be evident by itself, and the policymakers will follow, and the evaluators, kind of a teacher who says this is good, and it will be followed. What are the consequences? One of the first tenets of this idea of evidence is that we need to attribute the results, the effect of a policy to the cause, to the intervention, with the assumption that the policymakers want to know whether their intervention can be attributed a positive effect. The idea of attribution is that they want to know whether what they did was the only and necessary cause of an effect. This is the basic idea on which people say, even from the point of view of value for money, I spend the taxpayers' money, I want to show that the taxpayer money of my own country, of my own ministry is well spent. Is this possible, first of all, and is this correct? I think that it is neither possible nor correct. First of all, correct. Is it correct? What is the idea behind attribution? Which, of course, attribution is, I mean, in philosophy of science and the causal studies, you know what is attribution. But in our case, in policy making, is it correct to ask for being attributed the result, the impact of what we did? First of all, effects of something can be obtained in many different ways, through different causal packages. What does it mean? It means that if I want to have more employment or better education or a better health service, there are many different ways of doing that. I should compare the different ways and decide which one is best. Maybe something is good because it is done by my ministry in collaboration with someone else. I can compare how certain results have been obtained through different methods. So the best way would be that of comparing the different ways, but acknowledging that there are different ways. I think it's a good thing that there are different ways, that there are possibilities, because otherwise we would feel ourselves constrained into just always the same stream, do something in a certain way and read it on the books and then do it. No, there are many, the reality is much more lively and allows us many possibilities. And this is what we think we should exploit. So not look for the best way, but look for many different ways in which something can be done. And so diversity, combination is something which is important. And so we should work to how to understand how we can collaborate with other people, with other groups, across different levels, across the board. And second, most of our policies are based on collaboration and partnership. I mean, in development, the general tenet is that there is a Paris Declaration saying that the aid should be delivered through partnership, through collaboration among donors, through collaboration between donors and the recipient. I mean, it is all this idea of partnership that is there, where all our programs, where our policies should be nested. But if we think that we want to know what exactly we have done, we lose completely the value added by the idea of collaboration. So I think it's not the right idea of asking for that. But that is because we should not be isolated and we should not be single-minded. We should go on and think of all the possible things. And this is a kind of second loop learning, how in a certain situation we can get to something different from what we have done before that reframes our way of thinking. Then, let me tell you that having read many evaluations that have tried to attribute effects to the cause, instead of showing what works, very often they show what does not work, because the expectations are very high, the objectives have been put in a certain way which not necessarily are achieved. So it is possible that there are failures from that point of view, but which could not be a failure if it were looked at from a point of view of collaboration, of contribution, of the fact that there are unexpected effects that can also be good and not necessarily bad. So the idea of attribution, which of course is good from the point of view of having a good causal analysis of what works, from the point of view of policy making, may have as some risks, some hidden points. So I think it would be much better to assess the contribution of partners and how it is possible through partnership to have better results than just working in isolation. And if we don't do that, there is the risk of engaging only in programs where attribution is possible. This is something that we see now in official documents. Since we need to have effect demonstrated, we should engage into the policies where it is possible to demonstrate this. This is very dangerous because we should engage in policies that are worth doing, not simply that are evaluable. Being evaluable is a very good thing, and we evaluators should engage in to try and find out how to evaluate difficult policies, but not the other way around. Otherwise, we put methods before what we should do. And we should help policymaking find new ways and innovate, and not the other way around. Well, when we talk about robust methods for evidence, of course, there is idea that something is more robust than something else. And I don't need to talk here about the idea that random control trials are considered at the top of this hierarchy, and going down to statistical studies, to surveys, to interviews, to focus groups, up to the bottom of ethnographic studies, which are considered something which is not reliable from the point of view of being able to generalize what is possible and what is can be enforced in different ways in other places, and we'll see it just in a moment. This idea is an idea that intervention are considered as single act treatment using the medical metaphor. So an intervention is considered as a treatment that should be administered in the just dose following a certain protocol. If we follow all these steps, then the intervention will show its effect. If we don't do that, then it is possible that there are no results. So the idea is following the steps as if the intervention were a medical treatment. There is a long debate, I cannot enter into it here, about many things, but first of all, there is the idea that this type of random control trial can be done in situations which are quite rare, where there is a simple causality. An intervention produces an effect. And we know that an effect can be produced by many different types of intervention, as we said before, and as we know, all of us in reality. There should be stable context. The things should not change over time and from place to place, because otherwise it is not possible to make comparison between where we have done the intervention and where we have not done it. There is an idea of linear implementation. What we do is always the same act, the same activities should be followed by everybody according to certain protocols that they put down. And there are large cases among which it is possible to have a statistical study. Most programs are not fit for this type of research. And so what does it mean? That we should not do it in other places? Because if we keep to this idea that there are some kind of methods that are better than others, and if we realize that this type of method cannot be applied in many cases, so what does it mean? That we are going to have less robust, less evidence? This is a kind of contradicting themselves. Or if we do it in another way, how can we treat it according to that idea? So this idea is too strict, in a sense, to allow us to look for other different cases. So even here, there has been a suggestion to implement all these programs that can be evaluated by robust methods. Esther Duflo, you all know it, as the Poverty Action Lab is doing random control trials in cases of development projects a very small level, and is promoting to follow those projects, those policies that can be tested through a random control trial, which is in a sense even stricter than what I was saying before. But apart from that, having this idea of this method should be followed in a certain way, there is a risk of not being able to perceive what should be done to improve programs. The idea is that we generally want to know whether a program produced effects. But programs produce effects not only in this mechanic way, input-output, but they develop different trajectories, and it is necessary to be able to interpret what is going on during different cases. The idea of a linear implementation means that everything, first of all, that the more you give, the better it is. So there is a linearity in improvement. And second, that there is always the same trajectory. But it is more important to look at the fact that in some cases you need to have a strong motivation at the beginning to make something start, and then it may start. It's a kind of J curve. In other cases you have the opposite. You have something that works very well at the beginning because there is enthusiasm, because there is money that is coming, a new situation, and then the enthusiasm fades. So there you have to keep it pushing in order to keep it up. So knowing the different trajectories, which is something which is not got from those kind of methods, is very important from the policy point of view, for being able to keep the programs going, not only keep the programs on track, but keep the programs moving. So it is not simple that you do something and it goes. You have to do something and be really pushing in order to do that. And secondly, as we all know, there are emergent trends, something that happens that was not expected, that was linked to what happened before, or that produces new effects, forward and backward linkages. So in a sense, there is a need for other ways of doing in order to get what we want, which is the development of good programs and knowing and really learning why something works well and how it does. So there is all this problem of validity that is tackled in different ways by methodologists. You know, we speak of construct validity, the relationship between variables and tools and what we are trying to understand. Internal validity, if something that we see working, if worked in that situation, and external validity, if we can expand, if we can generalize. Let's talk about this idea of internal versus external validity. There is a big literature now about this relationship. There's a wonderful article by Nancy Cartwright. She speaks about a random control trial being able to say something worked here. In that case, in that circumstance of time and place. not it will work for us in other circumstances. Why? Because everything that is brought from one situation to another needs adaptation, needs intervention of the people who put it into place. So it is necessary, if something works somewhere, in order to make it work elsewhere and in other conditions, there are subjective elements, adaptation. People have to decide to do something to make it work. So it is not simply, cannot be understood simply by a method of comparison before and after. And another famous writer, Moore, talking about different methods for impact analysis and causality, says that understanding the process is the most important factor for generalizability, which is a complement to what I was saying before. Because only if we understand why, how something worked in a certain situation, we can try and repeat it. And we have ideas for what we have to do for adapting it to other situations. So we need to get the participant feedback. I was talking at the beginning of getting the judgment of the people. Otherwise, we would miss a source of learning. Remember, we are talking about learning. How do we learn from these methods? And the big source of learning is from the people who say what they rate as a good thing. So there is not a hierarchy of methods, I would say, but situational responsiveness. Methods should be fit for purpose. And alternative design to impact evaluation have been developed, and lots of people are working on that. And they are based on different approaches to causality and to explanation. And I don't enter into it here because it would be a talk of itself. But it's true that these ideas have been developed throughout, and what have been challenged is not generally the fact that other type of methods can be as robust and as fit for purpose as a random control trial can do in very limited cases. So in the other cases where it is not possible, we should develop other methods alternative to them. And in any case, these, because they are fit for this other purpose, they are also able to understand how to adapt, how to understand what worked in order to be able to generalize, which is the big limit of random control trial. One way for having good programs is providing guidelines for correct implementation. Here also there is this idea of correct. What is an implementation failure? You know, when we talk about failures, we talk about program failures. The program expected something to happen which did not because the people did not behave that way. And implementation failure, the idea was good, but the people at the operational level were not able to did not follow the rules, etc. Of course, from my point of view, guidelines should offer an opportunity of choices. Say you could this in a certain way. Of course, there are many possibilities, except those who are illicit. There are lots of possibilities for doing something in a different way and obtaining the result which you want to obtain. On the contrary, if we impose rigid guidelines, the risk is that of conformity and ritualistic compliance. I mean, I think that everybody of us, at least in Europe, in structural funds, in programs which are administered from above according to strong guidelines, know what I mean by saying that there is ritualistic compliance. And this is very negative, because instead of having a push to do something for the improvement of our policy making, it has been a way of resisting it and of developing bad practices. And the need there is for appreciation. If we impose conformity, we don't appreciate innovation and responsive adaptation, which is what is meant, what is needed for generalization. We don't understand the need for discretionality of street-level bureaucrats, people who are working with the people, with the clients, and of entrepreneurial managers, because at all the levels of the administration, there are people who think how better to improve what they should be done in ways that are good for their context. So discretionality is not working in an arbitrary way. It's working in a way which is responsible, which understands what should be done according to the situation where one is. So this is a need for not following conformity, but for understanding innovation and being able to recognize it, even if it does not immediately provide the expected result, but it promises something good. It should be we should enter into that, and I think that is very important. Another consequence which I fear at the moment, as I'm looking around and I'm seeing a lot of terms of reference that request specific design and methods. Of course, RCT, quasi-experiment, etc. Is this an improvement? It is presented as an improvement. I've seen it in European programs, in Italian programs as well. I think this is not an improvement in the sense that designs, not that the commissioner should not be interested into designs, but design should be agreed between commissioner and evaluators in a constructive dialogue. Why? Because design should be fit to the demands of the evaluator, but to the characteristic of the programs. And they cannot be established since the beginning. The evaluator should be able to say what kind of design they would use in certain situations. Of course, negotiating with the commissioner what are the resources, what are the constraints, what are the needs of the moment. So there should be a dialogue and not an imposition, because design should be appropriate to program characteristics. It is always said that evidence impact evaluation is for learning, with a certain idea that accountability is for monitoring, but learning is for impact evaluation. And there is the implication that having learned a good lesson, the evidence of what works, then action will follow. We will act in the best way. I wouldn't think this is always the case. First of all, because the process of learning, and I will go back to that, is not that which is explained in this simple way. Learning takes place in mediated ways. We don't simply learn something and then do it, but we understand it, we decide what to take and what is good for us and what is not good. It is this idea of double loop. We have to rethink something in a different framework. So in a sense, learning is not an immediate, direct way of acting from knowledge. In the same way as when we talk of the uses of evaluation, we can think that the end of evaluation is given a result, offering a result that will be immediately put into practice by the commissioner, and at other time we say that this does not always happen, or very, very rarely happens, but evaluation have a cognitive use. Evaluation provide us with ideas, with theories, with better understanding of a situation that will be taken into account, will reframe our way of thinking of the same problem in different ways. That is a process of learning, and I think we should look at that more than a simple way of putting in, simply cutting what doesn't work and increasing what works. An example on this I take from a debate, a discussion on development evaluation. David Ellerman has written a very good book called Helping People Help Themselves, where many of the ideas I have been talking about are in. Talks about this way of imposing what works in development projects. And he says that this idea has centralistic implication. It is the center, these are his words, it is the center that knows and then spreads good news to the periphery. And this is contrary to policies of putting the country in the driver's seat. That was the main objective, the main aim of development policies since the late 90s and all over the last decade. So it should not be the center that spreads the good news, but it should be the donors and the beneficiaries that together work in order to have the both, or better, it should be the recipient, the people who receive the aid, but who are the doer, because it talks of the relationship between the helper and the doer. And the doer is the driver, in that case of the metaphor of driving. And It says, knowledge of what works should come from the direct experience of those who are interested by peer-to-peer benchmarking and horizontal experimentation. So this is a different way of learning what works and involving the people based on the basic principles of one of the big policies that we are interested in, which is development. So, what are the challenges for evaluation that I understand and I would like evaluation to take from thinking in terms of the current crisis? First of all, improve the common tools that we have. So, or make ordinary tools usable to the people. The idea I was talking about how to interpret the ratings, the league tables, etc. Make it more open, more democratic, involve more people. They are not bad in themselves. They are good if they are well used, but they should be used with this idea of development. And in the case of program evaluation, not simply stick to the idea that there is a best way of doing it, but develop alternative designs that are able to understand what are the policy implications and what are the possibilities of using evaluation for this idea of development, of democracy, of equity. So, realize that the current crisis needs to be thought with a different framework, able to support the thrust for autonomy, equity, and development. This idea that I was thinking at the beginning, that we are living this crisis with an idea that something should change, not simply that something should remain the same or worse as it was before. This is captured by the idea learning to learn. We should learn how to understand what is going on, how to be able to push all our energies, all our intellectual tools to make it become more evident, more able to diffuse its way of thinking, and to give us the idea that there are many possible ways to achieve the results we want, but all these possibilities involve the participation of people in a more democratic and equal way. Thank you.